Preparing.
Preparing, c'est bon, il faut que tu sur le mot de passe.
Sur Zoom, oui. Altier, là. Comme ça. Admettre. Je t'autorise. La chance. Et après, je vais te mettre co-host. Co-host. Voilà, comme ça, tu as tous les droits. Normalement, tu peux. Je vais remettre l'écran. A priori, oui. Et t'es là-haut.
Okay, try that. It should be called JB-Mouret. PPTX.
That's something like that.
Yes. We'll put it only on one. Probably less than that.
Il y aurait pas mal d'annonces. Ils étaient des trucs avant que tu passes. C'est le mec qui va faire encore bien. On fait ça pour les tons parce que c'est le midi après. Du coup, je prends son air et on va avoir très tard. Parce que comment ça va être les annonces électriques.
Du coup, il faut que je partage mon écran.
I'll hand it over to you. Hand it back to me quickly. I'll hand it over to May. Or then you just hand it directly to May.
Partager. Écran 2.
On a associé la présentation.
Pas en ligne. Pour l'instant, c'est.
Let me ask one more question.
You are excited.
And then Dennis gave me a copy. Fabulous, because now I can stay up all day.
You want another one?
You want
To talk faster?
No, I don't hit the website. Yes.
like a screenshot of the website?
No, that's perfect. But while I speak, can we have the speaker's website?
While you speak.
Yes. Yeah.
C'est possible ça?
Oui.
Ouais, ok.
And you want to scroll and manipulate
Or just.
so that I duplicate the screen and then I
Duplicate the screen.
okay. And then when we exchanging, I will
Go to the slide.
Yeah.
And, Sébastien, je vais commencer moi-même.
Ouais.
Avec le petit truc. Passe à Penousal. Penousal passe à Untitled.
Ok, moi je gère là. I don't know. Springer is messing up with us. But if you pay 60,
She tells me that this edition was late.
a little bit,
Yeah,
but they should be online still.
but they are not online. It's just the announcement. And they say it will be published in May or June.
Really?
On the, look at this website. It says June.
So we resent an email yesterday. I hope they will do it because I don't see why they will take that much time
Yeah.
to publish it. Depuis pour Evomisal. I can push you in. Sorry.
C'est bon, slide.
I guess he will come.
No, come down.
So is it smart enough for me to move mics, for them to change mics? Or no, I have to go to the mic.
You can use that one.
Okay, so how do I
Yeah,
turn it on?
yeah, just here.
Okay, but I don't have my laptop in front of me, do I?
It's gonna be this laptop.
Yeah,
And
okay.
I need to change stuff, so, but
Okay, then we'll switch places.
I can put it on the chair and,
You're on your laptop?
I can't, because I need to switch the slides there.
Oh. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our second keynote of EvoStar. Before we get to the keynote, we have a couple of orders of business to attend to. So first off, a reminder for this evening's dinner. Since it is away from Toulouse, we are taking buses to go to the dinner. The buses will be departing as soon as the final sessions finish. Go directly from the final sessions to the buses. There will be 3 sessions that are finishing a bit earlier and 1 session finishing with an additional talk, so that that last talk, all of you go to the final bus. There are hopefully slightly less than 180 of you that will fit in 3 different buses as soon as the buses are full, they will make their way to the Domaine de Rochemontes. You are free to wander around the beautiful domain, explore it until 7:15, where if you'd like to take part in the EvoStar group picture, we need you to be in front of the castle, okay? Once the group picture is finished, everything else should be fairly clear. If you are not planning on attending the dinner or have not come and seen me for a +1 ticket, please come see me at lunch at the registration table. If you have a dietary restriction for the dinner this evening and you haven't declared it and you haven't received your little note, please come see me at the registration table. That's all that I have for now. Now I'd like to hand it over to Penousal, who's going to talk about some species awards.
Okay, so good morning. Several announcements. First, the proceedings. Some of you may have noticed that we still don't have the proceedings for some of the conferences. Be patient. We got an email from Springer. They promised us that the proceedings will be ready soon. Soon as in the 24th of April. So, you know, sometimes these things happen, but the proceedings will eventually be available. The second announcement has to do with the AGM of Species. The AGM of Species is happening on Friday. Most of you are members of Species, and Species is the Society for the Promotion of Evolutionary Computation in Europe and surroundings. It organizes this event. It also offers scholarships, organizes summer schools, and so on and so forth. So we have the AGM on Friday. Please feel free to participate. And this year we'll have, again, the election of the executive board. We are doing things slightly different this year. So we have candidates. So if you can visit the Species website, there is over there the executive board elections. Sylvain, can you click on it? And you have the list of candidates. They all made a small declaration, and you can pick among them and vote on Friday. The vote will happen during the AGM, but using an online form. Last but not the least, as you know, every single year we have the EvoStar Awards for outstanding contributions to evolutionary computation in Europe and surroundings. Never forget the surroundings. So last year we had two awardees, Colin Johnson and Iñaki. Iñaki received the award at the banquet last year. Actually, Colin received the award at the banquet last year. Iñaki didn't because he wasn't present. He was having knee surgery or something like that. So the plan was to give Iñaki the award live. Iñaki is here, but he's not currently at the room. So this makes this kind of awkward because he's not here at the moment. So hopefully we'll join it later on, but nevertheless, here's the more public recognition for Iñaki's award that happened last year. Okay, let's give him a round of applause. And I guess that's all for now. So Uname, whenever, oh, you are over there.
Great. So it's my pleasure to be able to introduce the 2025 winner of the Julian Francis Miller Memorial Award. Next slide. So let me just tell you a little bit about this. This award is dedicated to a very dear colleague of the entire community who we lost. His name is Julian Francis Miller. And Julian just did brilliant research. I encourage anyone who has never read one of his papers to pick one up. All of them are very inspiring. We're very inspired by his interest in representation with Cartesian genetic programming and his great interest in understanding the parallels between biology and evolutionary computation. There is a committee that awards this award. It's currently in 2025, I think Wolfgang chaired it. On the committee is Mark Schonauer, not present here, Marco Tomasini, not with us today, and myself. And so in 2023, the award went to Susan Stepney. And in 2024, it was awarded to both Dario Floriano and Hod Lifson. Next slide. So in 2025, the award goes to Jean-Baptiste Mouret. And I wonder whether there's anyone in this room who hasn't seen the cover of this Nature. This is the cover of Nature, and this is evolutionary computation making it, because this is a robot developed by Jean-Baptiste and his team that can self-repair with evolutionary computation underlying it. And it put EC on the map to a great extent. And it's not just this article that we want to recognize by giving Jean-Baptiste the award. We want to award all the other contributions he's made scientifically to the community, and we thank you so much for them. So on behalf of the committee and everyone here, congratulations, and please address us in a keynote.
So thank you very much for the introduction. I'm honored by this award. It's a great pleasure to be here in my community and in the French city too. So it's really be at home with people I like very much. And since this award is about map edits and quality diversity, I thought it was a time to reflect a bit about like the journey, where we started, what we tried to do, and what inspired us. So, but will not be a talk about recent results and all the new catalog of all the things, the great things we do in our group and all the things. It's more taking the time to look at basically almost 20 years, trying to think about these issues and what we're actually trying to do with evolution and my point of view about that. So I hope you find it somewhat inspiring. If you already know a lot of these algorithms, it's also a way maybe try to piece the things together as a whole picture and maybe see what we could do differently in evolution. So the title is, of course, a quote from Darwin, but probably know. It's the last sentence of the Evolution of Species. And I want to start with the basics. I've always been inspired by evolution as an algorithm, like the master algorithm behind life. It's amazing how such a simple algorithmic procedure can actually create such diversity of life forms, so animals, but also trees, bacteria, everything that populates our planet. And all of them are like optimized, very refined, very, very good, and also highly diverse. And that's what I wanted to see in a computer, like taking this deeply important idea. So of course, when I started to work on that, I looked at the literature. It was 20 years ago. These books were already classics. And basically, they tell a simple story, is that we can take inspiration from evolution to make what they call genetic algorithms at that time, but what we call no more evolutionary algorithms. And the basics was you start with a population, you do some mating, so you take, you mix the best solutions, you get a new population and you loop like this. This is a picture from 92. And I think that's still more or less the dominating principle behind most of the work we can see in our conferences. And the modern version is something like this. We have a population of solutions that can be described with many things. When we evaluate them, we select them, we add some variation, we get a new population and so on. I think all of you know this very well. It's just to set the stage where we were. So the dominating view of that is that artificial evolution is an optimization algorithm. Basically, we want to maximize a function. It has some good properties. So you can optimize non-convex functions. You can hope to have some kind of global optimizations. You don't need to compute a gradient because in many situations, gradients are not available. You can explore structures. You can explore Now we have all this AI generating crazy images every day. But still, you can see evolution in front of your eyes and how you move in this space. So what's really, really fascinating in the result of Peak Breeder is that we get a lot of diversity. So we don't get a single optimal solution. We get all these crazy images. So we see everything like pictures, crazy pictures like this, maybe like an apple, faces, planets. All of these have been evolved with interactive evolution, with the CPPNs. And what's also interesting is that people can branch from the results of other users. So you could take this design and that was made by someone else, but click on evolve here. And then you can have new mutations and you can play with it and maybe have your own ideas and you get new images that are stored in the system. So you get all this, this crazy diversity. And some of they get the diversity back. This is not nature, but still we get a lot of different shapes and interesting and images and that's much closer to what I wanted for evolution. So we get this amazing creativity. And then they did a very interesting experiment is to say, can I find these solutions that I found with interactive evolution with objective-based search? So just running the same evolutionary algorithm, the same encoding, now can I find it? If I can find it, that means that somehow artificial evolution is working. If I cannot find it, something is really missing because we know we can find this solution by mutation and crossovers because it was found by mutation and crossovers. So they tried. They took one of the pictures, so this skull here. And with interactive evolution, these are the stepping stones, so things along the way to get there. They get this in only 74 generations. That's very little compared to what we usually do in artificial evolution, in which we have, I don't know, thousands of generations. So then they try the exact same encoding. They put this as a target, and the fitness function is simply the difference in pixels. So they take this image, they compute the distance for every pixel to the target image. That gives a fitness score. Of course, if you get the perfect fitness score, if you have exactly the same image, and you get anything in between, if you don't have it. And these are the best results they found. Nothing like a skull. So something is really missing because we know we can find it. It has been found by evolution, but we cannot find it by just setting this as a target. So what are the lessons of this experiment? First, we saw it on the previous slide. The stepping stones are not like the final image. Not at all. If you look at the steps, here, you get maybe some things like, okay, there's maybe a vertical symmetry axis, but basically does not look like a skull. So if you assume that every step is more or less going in the right direction, you would be wrong because the path to get there is not a straight path. So of course, we always say that evolution is global optimization. It will not necessarily just do hill climbing, so just go only in the direction of the gradient and so on. But still, we are assuming that if we have a better fitness, that means we're closer to the goal. That's something that should be favored. That's a very strong assumption because that's not true in that experiment, for instance. If you get closer to the goal in terms of objective, does not necessarily mean that you're closer. So that's a very important assumptions about stochastic optimization that, of course, does not hold in that situation here. Then we also learned that the representation itself is not the main issue, or at least not the only issue, because we have very different and creative image with a representation that was existing already, but we already had design. So something was also not right if we knew that this representation was capable of representing these solutions, but we were not finding them. So something was missing in the picture. And also, surprisingly, we always think also, with more computers, that would be better. But here we get these nice images in 100 generations. So that's very short. That's almost nothing on the computer. So yeah, it's not only a question of computing not being there. It's because we can find these nice images very quickly, at least as humans. But of course, there are humans. Humans are smart. Humans have many ideas. The key might be the human. Maybe we're just only seeing the brain of the human reflected in these images. So now the goal is say, okay, I want to have the same creativity, but without the human in the loop. How can I find the same kind of results? So the answer from Ken Stanley and John Lehman was called novelty search. And they said, okay, let's put aside what we're doing with objective-based search, so trying to solve the problem. Maybe we could just ignore the fitness function and just do exploration and try to find something novel. And then we will create all this creativity because our goal will be creativity. Our goal will be to create something that we didn't see before. So what is a new thing in when we do reinforcement learning or robotics or this kind of fields? Basically, it's a new behavior. So things should behave differently, should try to do something that was not done before. So we designed a very straightforward algorithm. They set this fitness function as this, what they call the novelty score, is essentially the density around a point in the behavior space. And the key point is in the behavior space, not in the genotype space. Before, we were trying to encourage diversity, but in the genome space, because that was, the question is, how do I play with the genomes? They look at this and say the behavior. So behaviors, how does like a robot, for instance, behaves? So for instance, here you have two robots. They might have very similar genomes, but they do behave very differently because they go in two different places. These two robots might just turn over themselves. They might have very different brains, very different genes, but at the end they do the same thing. They just turn on themselves. So that's the same behavior, but different genomes. And that might be closed genome, but very different behavior. So the novelty score is just simply how far you are from all the solutions that you have discovered before. So that's a push for exploration in the behavior space. And surprisingly, it does work in many situations, especially when the problem is deceptive. That means when the objective function is not helping you to go in the right direction. So this is a very easy example on a maze. If the goal is here and you do objective-based search, you tend to favor solutions that are in that neighborhood, and you are attracted by this corner, which is a trap, so it's deceiving. But if you simply use novelty search, you will start putting points, and once we have explored and found many ways of being here, then you start going here, and at the end you reach the goal. So someone not looking for the goal helps you to find the goal. And you get all this diversity along the way, you get all these new stepping stones that maybe are meaningless for the final result, but are actually useful. It also works on surprisingly more complex solutions. So here this is about walking. So walking is also deceptive because if you take like a biped robot, there is a very attractive minima, which is to jump forward one step, and that's it. And that's not a very good stepping stone to learn to walk because you need to learn to balance before learning to actually walk. So if you just use objective-based search, you tend to find something, but something like that. That's what they found in the paper. But if you do it by novelty, after a while, you have found all the ways of falling, and you need to start finding a way of making two steps because that's a novel behavior. And then you start learning to walk, and then you get this kind of result. So very inspiring result, and definitely more creativity. But somewhere along the way, we lost optimization. We're exploring, and exploring by itself is interesting, but it's infinite. That's like stem collecting, or something like this. You can just do a lot of things that do not matter that much, first, for your problem. If you're trying to solve an engineering problem, you have a problem to solve, not just exploring the world. And you also want all these refined solutions that are actually very good at what they do. You just don't want to lose creativity. So we got some of the endless forms, but not the most beautiful part. So this is missing from novelty search. So let's go back to Pig Breeder for a while. If you look at Pig Breeder, it's not that there is no goal. We didn't set a goal to people. We didn't ask, find a skull. And actually, I think they tried at one point, and people didn't find a skull, just by when you search for it. But people still have goals. Each user has his own idea, maybe inspired by, oh, that looks like a butterfly. Let's try to explore butterflies. And they have a goal in mind. It's not like there is no goal. Also, there is taste in that. Like people like things. So it's not between images they choose. And they choose in a somehow consistent way, at least for a while. And then users can branch from that and try to use ideas from others. But basically, each user optimizes for something. And if you look at different ways, similar, but maybe not in evolutionary computation, In art, you have also many ways of drawing the same subject. These are all pictures of self-portrait of Picasso along the years. So they're all representing the same thing, but they do, he did have like a goal in mind. He was searching for something. It's not like he was randomly drawing pictures of himself. He had something in mind. So the lesson of all of that is, if we go back to the very basic of evolution, is that the way we see the mainstream evolution algorithms, this is mimicking what we call microevolution. So that's evolution inside a niche. So you take a petri dish like this one, you put bacteria, and you're in very specific niche, and that will be optimizing. We can observe this in a petri dish. You will be optimizing and finding maybe better ways of using the same food source over time, but you will never see this explosion of new species because you're inside your niche. You're inside this very, very small ecological niche. But what I was caring about is actually macroevolution. Macroevolution is, if we go back to Darwin, the evolution of species. That was the title of the book. And that was the question. It was not how do I optimize? It was where do all these species come from? What's the reason of all this diversity? And that was the question that was very mysterious, is the evolution of species. I think at that time, even at that time, most people agreed that iterations inside the niche could happen. So like iterative improvements, perfecting things, that was not the main idea. The question is, okay, but where do the species come from? This is where like maybe God decided that there were different species. That was the real debate and the real scientific mystery. And somehow we forgot it. We diverged to optimization and we forgot about species. And then we forgot about diversity. So going back really, Darwin's The Origin of Species. So it's especially fit because today we're for the Species Society. And species should be at the center of thinking about artificial evolution. And I think up to now, it's almost an afterthought. That's not a word you see in any of the presentation of today, for instance. We don't talk about species, we talk about optimization. But species was the real question of evolution, and I do think it's still the main question. So let's go back to species then. These are many different species, animals here, plants. How does that work? Very, very broadly at a very high level, these species are not all competing because they are occupying different ecological niches. So niches is a complex concept. It depends on your food source, on your behavior, but basically they behave differently. They occupy different parts in space. And so they are not competing. For instance, this fish is not competing with the elephant. There is no reason to put a global competition. Like the elephant is not better than the fish. They are in their own niche. They're all optimized for their niche. They're very good in their niche. Their niche might be destroyed or things like this, but basically they're not competing. And what we do when we do evolution as optimization, it's a global competition. We put all the species at the same level, say, let the best win. That's not how it works in nature. These species are not competing together, but they can interact. A species can invade an empty niche, like it's something new. For instance, that's what happened in the evolution of life when the first animals got out of the water. It was empty, so they could do things there because nobody was there. So they could create a new niche, a new way of living. And you can also invade another niche by an innovation. So species becomes much better, I don't know, eating fishes. I don't know, maybe this leopard can eat fish, no? And they start competing. So some leopards can do, but this one was in South Africa, so I don't think it was eating fishes. Didn't see many rivers there. And of course, optimization occurs inside the niche. So inside the niche, this fish is competing with the similar fish eating similar things in a similar part of the world. They're all competing together. There is competition, but not global competition. Local competition inside the niches, and then there are all the interactions between the niches. So now the question becomes how to capture the evolution of species with a simple algorithms that can be useful for engineers, somehow, for solving problems. So one idea that we had also in the time, and we saw a lot in artificial life, is maybe we need to simulate whole ecosystems. So we need the complexity of ecosystems to get this kind of dynamics. So some people, maybe some of you, started to put like, let's simulate trees, let's simulate breeding, let's simulate geography, let's simulate like, I don't know, different environments, water, things like this and make something, and the complexity in the species will appear from that. And I think it's a very interesting program, but does not really solve my problem to have a nice, simple algorithm that I can use. It's more like very hard to control. I don't know if some of you tried, but controlling a big ecosystem, simulating everything, is very fun to watch. There are billions of parameters, and you don't really know what to do with that. You cannot use it to solve your problems. Another idea was coevolution. Coevolution is you make different species and you make them compete together, but they are different species. They cannot mate together. We tried this. Again, some of you here probably have tried. It's actually very hard. It's quite unstable. Usually you have two species, so it's not necessarily that rich. You tend to forget what you have done before. So you have all these effects in which you look back to the behaviors that was good at the beginning. Didn't work very well. I mean, I was hoping that would work, but didn't work for me, at least. So this is where we arrived to this map-edit algorithm, which tries to capture these ideas in the simplest algorithm we can. And again, I think the strength here is being simple, so that capturing only what's required. And then we can discuss about all the many ways of making this better. But the root needs to be almost as basic as the basic genetic algorithm. So something that fits in 5 lines of code that you can explain quickly, and that does things differently. So the concept is not complicated. What we start is that we take a grid. So let's start with a 2D grid for now. We have 2 feature dimensions. So could be behavioral features, could be whatever you care about for diversity. You make a grid. And in each cell here, you have a combination of these 2 features. These are features that you can measure on your solution. So when you simulate a solution, when you evaluate it, you get some features about the solutions. Like, I don't know, if you are evolving artificial animals, could be the height of the animal, could be what they eat, some things you can measure. So let's say we have 2, and now the goal is not to optimize. The goal is to fill all these cells with the best species possible. So the goal here is put something here, something here, something here, and so on. So that means finding a species that has this specific combination of features in the way it behaves, and which is also the best of its kind. And of course, the best of its kind might not be that good, or might be very good in terms of a fitness function that you define. How do we fill this grid? Well, there is no population, so we consider that the grid is the population here. So every cell filled with a species has one individual in that. We randomly select one of what we call the elite, so the best solution we found for a cell among the cells that were already filled. We had some genetic variation. We can have some development if you want. We evaluate the solution, so we determine both the fitness and the features. And then we look at the features, we see in which niche we are. And we look at the fitness and we see, are we better as a new solution better than the one that's already there? If it's better, we replace. If it's worse, we just trash it. And we loop over that. So by itself, it's almost a genetic algorithm. The only question is that this solution is not competing with this one, first thing. And second thing, we are looking at features that are behavioral features. So not genotypic features, so not how the genome is, but something about the behavior or the features of the solution. So at the end, all these solutions do solve the problem because the problem is defined by the fitness function, which is what we try to achieve, but they do solve it in a different way because we're designing the algorithm so that each of these combination of features is a different way of solving the problem. So that means that the fitness function here returns 2 things. First, the fitness, and second, the features and the behavior. And we loop over that. We reuse everything we know. You can do this with genetic programming, with language models, with whatever you want. It will be the same loop. And again, that's the simplest loop we could find. So if you think about biology, that means that penguins might be here, fishes here, and the leopard here. They all occupy their niches. They are not competing, but they are optimized. So what does that change? First, I think the real realization is that we're trying to solve a different problem than optimization. And by itself, I think that's the most interesting contribution of quality diversity, is to realize that optimization might be a goal, but there might be other goals. And the goal here is different. And by itself, this is what you should keep in mind. But maybe there are other goals that we can solve with artificial evolution. So here it's finding a large collection of different solutions to a problem. And overall, I think diversity, besides the question about all this creativity, is useful by itself as an outcome of the algorithm. So typically you design, I don't know, we design in the past, for instance, shapes for cars. And you design a lot of shapes that are all very good in terms of performance. So they're all aerodynamic and so on. And at one point, you use the expertise of an expert to decide which one you actually want to make. So for instance, maybe because aesthetics, this one is very good, but it's ugly. Nobody will want to buy it. And that's very hard to encode in your fitness function, this aesthetic thing. So if you propose with several designs, you might choose the one you like best. And that's very easy to do once you have a collection of solutions. And many times we have a lot of expertise in our sites. So for instance, that's already, so they don't use quality diversity algorithm, but I think what they do is following the same idea that diversity is useful. I tried this morning to do a Google map from the train station to here, and it proposed 3 different paths. Because as an expert, maybe as someone from the city, I might know that, okay, this one, but maybe here there are stairs, or maybe this is climbing a hill, or maybe there are, I don't know, not nice people here. I would prefer to take this path, which with maybe is the same more or less time, but actually nicer walk. So I use that, and very often I don't take the best one. I take maybe this one because I know the city and I would prefer this path. So that's the same kind of thing we want to do with evolution, is to propose several options, and then as an expert, you decide. So very quickly, I wanted to show an example of map edits on a simple arm. The problem itself is useless, but it's very easy to explain. So we have a planar arm, so something like this, what you have in factories. We have the joints here. We have the end effector. So use trigonometry to compute the position of the end effector. You have joints that you can select. So depending on the joints, you get a different position here. And that's your behavior space is the position of the end effector. The search space is the position of the joints. And we define a fitness function, which is to be smooth, which means that we want something like the angles to be all the same. Of course, if they're all the same, then you cannot move, but mostly want to be similar. So we compute the standard deviation of them, and the fitness function is how low the standard deviation is. So you want basically nice, smooth paths. So that's the fitness function. Just to tell you what's nothing complicated here. There is a notebook that you can try online if you just want to play with that. And then the whole algorithm is only this page. There is 2 functions for archive management, 2 functions for initialization. And then the main loop is exactly what I described before. So we choose a cell here, we mutate, we compare, we put it back, and that fills the archive. So you can play with it online. My message here is that's more or less 10 lines of code. Anyone can do it. And that's also something very important for map edits, I think, is that something that anyone can reproduce and check by themselves that it does this kind of results quite easily. Not do billions of parameters, and you don't need my software to do it, which also means that no company ever comes to me and say, I want to implement map edits, because they can do it on their own in 10 minutes in the afternoon. So, but it's not well protected. But that's a very good strength. I mean, that means that we captured something interesting. So what does that work? And for instance, what you should ask is, why would that be better than just doing independent optimizations to put an optimization for each of these cells? Because at the end, you would still fill the map. So the main reason, in my mind at least, is high-performing solutions have a lot in common. So you're searching for good solutions to your problems, and they are not random. If you look at nature, that's clearly the case. So you see all this diversity, but actually, there are tons of things in common. Like, for instance, plants and animals, they all have cells. But we have much more in common, like just cells, which is the most basic thing. All the functioning of the cells and so on is very close between animals and plants. They are not the same, but they are close. That means that we share a lot with plants which are very far away from us. We see neurons, for instance. You look at C. elegans, which is a very famous small worm. It has neurons. It's amazing that this animal is using neurons like we do. So they're, again, not exactly the same neurons, but that's the same building block. and they occupy very different niches. All animals have muscles, so fruit fly has muscles too. It's also amazing that an elephant and a fruit fly both have muscles, so solve the problem of motion in a very similar way. And if you look at technology, like computers, you take your TV, you take my watch, you take satellites, they all use transistors, they all use common building blocks. So the conclusion is that all these solutions, they might be very different in terms of behavior, but they actually are very similar in terms of building blocks. So they occupy a small part of the search space. And if you look at the genomes of fruit flies and humans, for instance, we see that we share 60% of the genes with a fruit fly. So that's a very different animal. It's flying, it's small, it's an insect, does not have bones, and still 60% of the genes are the same. So something similar is happening when you evolve a species with mapelids, is that you also have a lot of common solutions, common building blocks. So we look at this from a more abstract perspective. You have some kind of axis of behavior. So there's only one here, but you could have much more. There is performance. What mapelids does is essentially to find this line here. And the assumption in that this line, all these solutions here that behave very differently, they all are in some subpart of the possible space, possible search space, and they're all concentrated here. And once you have found that, then you can express all the different things. So we check that in a simple example. So that's the same arm as before. You have two joints here, so we can plot the 2D search space. That's the top, the bottom here. And the position here, and we use the same fitness as before, so the standard deviation between θ1 and θ2. And we try to look at the position of the end effector. So on top, you see the mapelid's results. It fills the map nicely, and then we find this kind of shape. And then we look at these solutions and where they are in the genome space. And because it's a 2D genome space, it's easy to plot. And it's not well spread. So that's very well spread in the behavior space. That's not well spread at all in the genome space. It has a very specific shape. It's surprising. I mean, it's an interesting shape to me, but it's not random. It's not, we could have expected that. Like it's well spread in the behavior space. It's also well spread in the genome space. And that's not the case. So here, what we have that, you can actually exploit this structure because what you want is to have a good variation operator. So once you have found two solutions that are good, you want to generate another solution that is equally or as likely as possible to be good. And it happens that if you use some kind of crossover, so you take two solutions from a space like that, so probably more dimensions, but it's 2D here. You take two solutions, you mix them just with some linear interpolation, some kind of crossover like we used to do. And then you're very likely to find something which is in the same volume. Basically, if the volume is convex, you're guaranteed to find something which is also in the same volume. Of course, nothing is perfectly convex. So here, maybe it worked here and didn't work that. But already your chances of finding something which is also an elite is very high because you take two things that are elites, you fill the hole somehow. And that means that once you start having found a few good solutions, it fills very quickly because it exploits all the structure of this hypervolume of good solutions. So here, this is what we had on the 2D arm. And you see that if you take these two, you get something. Of course, if you take in wrong directions, you fail. But you still have biased a lot towards finding good solutions, just because of this structure. So we designed a very simple algorithm here to try to exploit that. But basically, this is crossover, something we have been done for years. And I was a bit, I didn't like crossover for a long time, saying main driver should be mutations. And we discovered by accident that crossover can be useful when you have the right diversity. We thought diversity does not change much, but here the way we construct the space makes the crossover basically the most useful operator. Very quickly, then we had 2D grid, but actually making an n-dimensional grid is more or less a solved problem. That's something we do in computer graphics. We propose something called CVT, so centrovoidal Voronoi tessellation, which is a way of dividing the space in any dimension, and then you make a grid. So I will not go into that, but by itself, making a bigger grid is not by itself very hard. Okay, very few shorts, briefly, a few examples. So we started by playing with these soft creatures. So they are like robots with voxels, and voxels can contract. And then the goal is to design them because it was close to the images of Pig Breeder. It's like the robotic version of the Pig Breeder images. It's also encoded by CPPNs. So we tried mapping it on that. We get this kind of pictures. Here, every point is a different solution. So you see a few samples here. The two behavior features are voxels that are filled, so how big the creature is, and the percentage of bones, which is the blue part, which is not moving. So you get some diversity in that at least. So we see, for instance, first wall picture of the search space. We see that when we have too much bone here, you cannot get high performance. That's obvious because you cannot move if you're only made of bones. You need the right like balance between bones and some kind of muscles. And then we get all these nice creatures, and we do see this explosion of creativity in the abstract way, maybe. But I was honestly surprised because I won this without thinking that would lead to this, and almost the first one to get that. So no tuning and whatever. And we get what we expect. All these species that are different, that are all trying to walk in a different way. And very recently, I discovered last year, some people in, I don't remember which lab, actually made this for real. So they made some small creatures evolve with map edits. These are magnetic material. So they are small cubes with different magnetic directions. And they activate this with a magnet, and then the small machines start to move. So that's more or less the same picture as before, but with real machines. So maybe one day we'll see this kind of machines working on. Okay, another application, which is of course dear to me because that was the one that was on the cover of Nature that Uma presented before. But another reason and fundamental thing about life is that we survive as a species because of diversity. So you probably all know that we had like 5 or 6 major extinction events in life. So we all know about the dinosaurs, meteorites, 75% of the species disappeared. But this happened many times in the history of life with much worse events. For instance, in the Devonian, 85% of the species disappeared. And the only way to survive in that is diversity. Because you have all these diversities of different ways of surviving. If some catastrophic event happens, then there are still some species that are resistant to that just by chance. So you cannot predict the future, but by keeping diversity, you're somehow anticipating the future. So that's what we want to do for robots, is that you cannot know what will happen to robots, but if you have diversity, then you're prepared for that. So this is the experiments we had at that time. We have a leg robot. We break it in an unexpected way. So for instance, here we unplug the wire. So the robot does not work anymore, and we want to work again. So the way we solved it is we used map edits to search for many ways of working. So different ways of putting your feet on the floor. We also try with different body orientations. So just try to find many ways of working. And the intuition is that if something is broken, one of them is likely to still work. One of them should still work because maybe it does not use this leg too much, or maybe it balances differently. You want this diversity. So here you see many examples that were found by map edits. Some are very fun, like this one. It found a way of not using the legs at all. So we had a niche with no leg. We did not expect it to be found, but it was an empty niche. And actually, the reason is that we are only looking at the contacts with the feet and also ignoring the first like half a second. So it found a way of creatively solving the problem, which is to work without the feet. So then we put all of that in a map. So behind this map here, it's a 6D map, but every pixel here is a different way of working with this 6-leg robot. And all of them do not have the same performance. Of course, if you only use 2 legs, you can have very slow. Then we put this on the robot, and we have an algorithm that's not the topic of today to try to quickly find in that map which one works best. It's called Bayesian optimization. By itself, it's a very classic optimization algorithm. It's the equivalent of what we call a surrogate model in evolutionary computation. And here you see the robot trying different behavior in the map to search for one that still works on the damaged robot. And you see after 20 seconds, you start seeing behaviors that start working a bit. And I think the next one is working. So this one is going on a straight line, very differently from what we designed before, very different from what you have seen in the previous images. And it works in spite of this damage. I don't know why, but it happens to work. So that's how diversity is preparing for future unknowns. And that's the behavior we get. So what was interesting for robotics here is that was probably the first time we saw a robot learning in front of your eyes in only 40 seconds. and that because it has a brain full of diversity. Okay, a few more examples just to illustrate my point. Matthew Fontaine and Stefanos evolved images, so that's Tom Cruise at different hair length and age. And that's very interesting to see that it does work. It's using a GAN to generate the images, but then map edits to try to select which activation of the GANs you want. This was a benchmark for robotics in which they evolve shapes with different grasp difficulty for robots. So that's also used for quality diversity, is to generate data sets that we can use for benchmarking. So that are not designed by hand, but follow some first principles. And all the shapes here are evolved with CPPNs too. And then you can try on the robot and evaluate your algorithm in some more unbiased way. People have been using Mapit to build game levels. This one is also very inspiring because that's the kind of things we have in mind when we say evolution as a creative designer. It's a machine that was designed to create nanoparticles. So I didn't understand anything about the chemistry behind these nanoparticles, but they use map edits to actually find novel materials. And these nanomaterials, then they look at them in the microscope and so on, and they get new properties. And last thing, of course, everything is about language models now. So I was very happy to see that MapEdit is one of the main evolutionary engines of AlphaEvolve, which is a software by Google to discover new mathematical constructions. So they found a lot of maybe not that important, but actually open problems in mathematics. So that they found a construction for problems that we didn't know how to construct things. And it's using MapEdits behind and language models. And I think we have very good opportunities here as people in evolutionary computation, because language models are very good at doing mutation and crossover. So before, like just generating a program was a big challenge, but now you take any language model, you put two pieces of programs, ask for a variant of that, and you get a variant that is syntactically correct, that you can use, that is meaningful. So there is very good combination between these evolutionary computation problems and language models. It was also used by Meta in Llama language models, so one of the main frontier language models. Then they use MapEdits to try to find adversarial examples. So like prompts that were making the model do things that they don't want to. So they found different attack styles like slang, role play, and so on. And then they search for many ways of tweaking the model. And then they use this to put new examples in their database so that they could avoid them. And also many other applications, rocket models, building blueprints, crystals, financial portfolios, GPU kernel design, test suits for software. So a lot of potential applications for that. Okay, I'm out of time. So trying to conclude, we also at one point tried to find the skull. So the original example by Ken and Jimmy, can we find it with MapEdits? Because we made a lot of progresses. I speak about species and so on. Okay, are we actually making progresses in trying to solve this problem? So we set this as a fitness function, so distance to this skull. We had two diversity objectives, dimensions, genome complexity and image complexity. We tried to find something generic. It didn't find necessarily what we should have found. But, and this is what we got. So that's the target. That was what we had in the paper. So when you use direct objective-based search, this is what we found with MapEdits. And this is the mean over all the cells of MapEdits, which not necessarily very meaningful, but says capture something. So we do find things that are better than that. So we see symmetry, we see eyes, we have some kind of skull shape here and here. It's not that far, but we're still not there. So I think there's still a lot of research to be done. I'd like at one point that our community finds a way or say, okay, I want to find that. I know it's feasible. Why our algorithms do not find it? What is wrong with what we're doing? So we're making progresses, but we're not there yet. And the stepping stones are surprisingly different. So to get to this shape here, we also see that there are big drops in fitnesses, in fitness values. And we see images that are very much different from the final image. So we have some of the properties that we observe in interactive evolution, but still haven't solved the problem fully. Okay, so a few words to conclude. So what matters to me is that map edits ask different questions than a traditional evolutionary algorithm. And I think this is what you should keep in mind. What is important is that maybe some of what puts map edits apart and all the quality diversity work apart is to look at, okay, what else can we do if we're inspired by evolution? There are not only the classic evolutionary algorithms. We can maybe solve other problems that are very different ways and very different constraints. Also, it puts the species back at the heart of artificial evolution, which is very dear to me. Somehow, I think we should have started with that. Maybe in the 80s, I don't know, John Holland should have started with species, and then he would have ended with maybe something a bit similar like map edits, and we'll have a very different history and a very different conference today. Because I don't exactly know why we chose to put the species away at that time. So maybe some people can shed some light on that who are older than me. But somehow we took a path which was inspiring because it was optimization. But we could have taken a different path and focused more on the species and less on the optimization. And that would have led maybe to a lot of different developments. What makes me proud is that all these people, like maybe you, using map edits in their work and actually reproducing the results easily and using it and making new things with that. It's very nice to see this kind of things happening. And I think that's because the main strength is that's straightforward to implement. And of course, that's only the beginning. So there are many ways of doing this thing better. Maybe it captures the essence of it, but of course, we can do much better. There are still two big problems. First, it's more open-ended, but we're still not there. It's the skull example that I just had before. To me, there's still a lot of work to do to try to solve this issue of species. And then, of course, the question is, this behavior feature distance that we use to determine the niches is defined by me, by people using the algorithm. It's not very satisfying. But everything we try, to me, is not satisfying either. So it's being question mark. Can we get rid of that and somehow discover it or find different way of defining niches that is very generic and still captures all this diversity? And three main opportunities, especially for students who are starting PhDs. I think these kind of algorithms are very good at designing benchmarks. Like for AI optimization, that would be a much better way of designing benchmarks to have algorithms designing benchmarks. So they will be less biased. They will have be designed from first principles. Of course, a lot of opportunities with language models. I think we can design prompts, programs, and a lot of things that were very hard to do now are possible. And then that puts evolution back. And something that also I believe a lot in. Yes, very good answer by Bill Langdon. Yes, that's also a very good reason. Of course, you don't fund a lot of studies with pure artificial life, and you also want to get money somehow, and optimization is easier to sell. And yeah, I think there is a big opportunity in AI, which is designing data sets and designing, basically designing data for big language models or big, what we do in robotics is vision language action models or vision language models. We need data from that. We don't have that much data. We could use simulators to generate that, but we need like a diverse set of images that all have some good properties, which is exactly what quality diversity does, is to design these diverse sets. So to me, data generation is a very good way of getting money to do quality diversity, is to say, let's solve this problem of data generation. Because in AI right now, everything is about getting the data. And we know that data in the world is finite, but we could generate a lot of data. But which data is, that's the kind of what this algorithm does. Okay, thank you. I'm probably out of time. I also want to thank all my collaborators, students. I'm forgetting many people here, but I wanted at least to thank them. Thank you.
All right, so we are going to open up the floor for questions. We have about 7 or 8 minutes because lunch is delayed, so we can get a chance to talk to you more and engage the audience. So Sylvain has a microphone. Put your hand up, he's going to get to you, and we'll take questions that way.
Thank you very much. It was exciting as expected. One of the fundamental notions is phenotypes, the P in map elites. And it occurs to me that the notion is, of course, always a little bit vague. Sometimes you equate it to behavior, but in an example of the soft creatures, both of those features were morphological. Okay, and of course, phenotype for a biologist is the morphology and the behavior all together. Do you make this distinction, like behavioral and morphological features?
No, I don't. I will follow the biologist on that. But phenotype can include anything, behavior, shape, whatever you want. It's a very, very general word. I think for Mapmates, we don't care. What we care is on which dimensions you want diversity. So if you want to see diversity in shapes, most probably you should be explicit and put diversity in features that are about the shape. If you want to see diversity in behaviors, then you put behaviors. I think the algorithm should be like agnostic about all of that. So on myself, I don't see any difference. Just up to you to choose.
You're asking for diversity in terms of shape, but you want diversity in terms of behavior, do you not?
No, the robots, we were asking for diversity in behavior. So all the robots were using the same shape and were working differently with their shape. So
Though you remove legs.
No, we didn't remove legs in simulation at all.
Ah.
And that was the main assumption, is that we could not anticipate the damage, because if you think about future damage, you always forget something. You want to send something to space, you need to think about everything bad that could happen. I think it's infeasible. So the question was, say, let's do it the way evolution did it for species, not think ahead about what could happen, but create diverse ways of doing the thing, which was working here. And one of them is likely to work in spite of the damage. And we were not changing the shape, but only the behavior.
Great talk. So when you're making the analogy to biology in terms of species, often or not, you have different reproduction rules in terms of like some species reproduce at a faster rate or like something like that. So I was wondering, where do you draw the line on the analogy to biology when it comes to like optimization in this way?
Yes, I don't know if I can draw a line, but the goal is to be very, very abstract. So to be at the same level of abstraction as genetic algorithms. So something that's very far from biology, not a model of an actual biological system, but more capturing what I liked about biology, which was this diversity of species. So we're far from biology, still having it's a decent model, at least at the very abstract level of species, which is different from what we were doing before. Of course, we could have, even in Mapmates, we could have species that like evolve faster than others. Like if you have a very good stepping stone, so some species that is actually in a very good space in which small variation of the species makes a lot of different behaviors. This kind of genome will invade very quickly all the other niches and so on. And somehow that's like a species that reproduces faster. But we don't want to go too far in this kind of models, because somehow this is still an engineering algorithm, something trying to solve a problem and not a model for biology. Maybe we're not too far, we are inspired by biology, but the goal is not to mimic biology, it's to capture the essence, what makes it great.
Bill, you have a question?
We have maybe in the chat.
Yeah.
And there are 3 in the chat maybe.
Okay, I have a question regarding multi-objective optimization. What role plays in your framework? It seems that you can also model, I don't know if all the framework as a multi-objective behavioral or the other things that way.
So I actually started to work on this topic by looking at multi-objective optimization, because multi-objective optimization gives you diversity. So you have different objectives. You don't get a single result, you get a diversity of results. And it was one of the main inspirations behind this work, is this diversity. The difference with multi-objective optimization, here the features do not have a direction. So being small or big, there is not one that is better than the other. So if you do multi-objective optimization, you put size as an objective. Okay, you need to choose if you want big or small. But if you consider this as a feature, then you just say, okay, I want diverse sizes. And then you have small and big and so on, and then you decide which one you like. But there is a strong connection in the sense that multi-objective optimization was probably the first time in which I saw, okay, we can have, the result is not a single solution, but many solutions. And that's already a very nice step forward to get something more interesting in terms of diversity.
Thank you so much for the inspiring talk. I particularly appreciated, like in your last slide, the opportunities, right? Because you kind of show to us like how this can be used in like modern challenges that we have. And about those challenges, the benchmarking generation. In the behavioral space, we might, if we want to generate benchmarks, we might be aware of a certain gap that we want, right, among solutions. With this grid in the behavioral space, you're not guaranteed that solutions are far away from each other because if they lie at the boundary, for example, of two or multiple cells, then diversity might not be as much as you would like it to be, right?
Yeah.
And I was wondering if it makes sense, especially for benchmark generation, to have also like a minimum like distance threshold in the behavioral space, in your opinion, or not?
So we did that several times to try to center the solution or things like this. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. Just to be clear, what I mean by benchmark generation is that every cell in the map is a function. And then you have a new optimization algorithm and you try it on all these functions. So you, for instance, use genetic programming to try to generate benchmark functions for your optimizers. And then this set of functions do not come from people inventing, okay, let's do unimodal optimization, bimodal, and so on. It just comes from, okay, they are all diverse functions that have different influences. And they are created by genetic programming or by language models, evolving programs, and things like this. So then, yeah, you can have a lot of improvements to make this better. Just saying it as a general question, where do we need diverse solutions? I think benchmarks is one of them in which we want sets, and I'm quite disappointed that we still use hand design benchmarks. I'd like to have something which is more principled.
Thank you. No, I like that a lot.
And that's a way to use like genetic programming in a way that exists already, but then combined with creative diversity is also a very nice way of exploiting what we have been doing about genetic programming. I'm still here at lunch, so.
Am I delaying lunch? Okay, so first of all, thank you for the inspiring talk. I myself have played quite a bit with Mappleets during my research, and I have often come across the problem where the axes that you're interested in for diversity are not the good axes that grant you good stepping stones to reach a high-performing solution, as this is at the end of the story, it's an optimization algorithm. How do you reconcile these two perspectives?
Why no, I don't. So I think that's a very good PhD to do. I don't have a very good answer to that. You could add more dimensions maybe to help, like we did in multi-objective optimization, add auxiliary objectives to try to guide, play with selective pressure in a way. I don't think we have found the solution yet. So I do think we get better stepping stones, but still we don't get the stepping stones we want, and they might not be aligned with the diversity you actually want to get at the end. And I think it's still an open problem. So I welcome any research that goes in that direction. I think that's a very interesting problem.
Thank you.
Wait. Before you leave, we need to give you the award. The award includes a check of 3,000 euros, but more importantly, so, okay. Yeah, sure. If you can. That's the important part of the award, I guess. It's just a plaque. Okay, guys.
Hey.
Thanks a lot.